It's the best. It's the place to be in Longmont on a Thursday evening, let me tell you. My name is Justin Veach. I'm the manager of the museum's Stewart Auditorium, and I curate public programs. It's good to see you all here. Thanks for coming out. Before we get going, I want to thank some people who make our programming possible: the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District, the Stewart Family Foundation, the Friends of the Longmont Museum, and of course, our museum members. Do we happen to have any museum members in the house? Hey, members, thank you. We simply can't do all that we do without you. I also like to thank our media sponsor, the mighty KGNU Community Radio out of dear old Boulder down the road. I don't know if you noticed, but we've kind of grown this sort of appendage out here in the parking lot. If you haven't been here in a while, that is new, and it's a 4,000 square foot gallery space, expanded lobby, and new entrance. So soon we will have 3 galleries going at once. We'll have a permanent history gallery, a kids gallery, and then a rotating space for traveling exhibitions and in-house curated stuff. It's going to be amazing. We're getting bigger. Yeah. And, you know, largely financed by our donors and friends of the museum. So thank you all for your support. Let's see. Tonight is being offered as part of our Thursday Nights at the Museum series. Every Thursday evening we offer a little something: a panel, a lecture, a film, performance, concert, a little bit of everything for everybody. Eclecticism. We like to make things eclectic here. We're a multidisciplinary museum, so everything is on the table. Now for tonight's program. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain, etc., etc. Yes, all this winter and spring and throughout this whole year, we'll be marking the occasion of our country's 250th and Colorado's 150th with programming designed to engage the American and Colorado experience. So it only stands to reason that we revisit a thing or two, or maybe even 3, about what makes our dear old country's system of government so darn special. This evening, we've gathered a few folks who've been working in the trenches in a variety of capacities to provide us all with a little civics refresher. It won't be comprehensive. Good Lord, we'd be here for weeks. This evening is intended to be nonpartisan, but please don't be aghast if the occasional partisan viewpoint is expressed. Our panelists are only human after all, not AI. I think we can all safely agree that despite all the partisan vitriol and divisiveness these days, or as my dad would correct me, divisiveness, that things have been feeling a bit screwy as of late, and that our collective trust in our systems of government have been shaken. We hope this evening succeeds in serving as a reminder of the role we all play in a representative democracy. Perhaps you'll even come away feeling empowered or even rejuvenated, or with your faith in our systems of democracy at the very least partially restored. Now let's welcome this evening's participants. Ladies and gentlemen, our panelists. Immediately to my right, we have Tom Cosgrove. Tom has decades of experience as a grassroots organizer, campaign manager, media consultant, strategist, and civic futurist. Relying on the power of groundbreaking research and out-of-the-box thinking, he has solved strategic problems for Fortune 500 companies, national political figures, nonprofit organizations, and even a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Yeah. He is founder and president of the Boulder-based nonprofit New Voice Strategies, whose mission is to, quote, create, incubate, and launch projects to heal divides, restore compassion, and strengthen self-government. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tom Cosgrove. Center stage, ladies and gentlemen, Molly Fitzpatrick. She was first elected as Boulder County Clerk and Recorder in 2018 and re-elected to a second 4-year term in 2022. As Boulder County Clerk and Recorder, Molly oversees 3 divisions: elections, motor vehicles, and recording. In her time as clerk, Molly has already overseen 9 elections as of the spring of 2024. She has consistently championed advancements that uphold the values of integrity, accessibility, and security in the elections process, and has worked to demonstrate these values to the public through proactive communication and outreach. Molly Fitzpatrick, ladies and gentlemen. And last but surely not least, our very own Assistant City Manager of the City of Longmont, Sandi Seader. Sandi earned her BA in Political Science and Sociology and a master's degree in Public Administration from Indiana University in Bloomington. She joined the City of Longmont as a management analyst in Public Works in 1998. In September 2003, she accepted the position of assistant to the city manager, and in 2012, she was appointed assistant city manager. In her 20-plus years with the City of Longmont, Sandi has been asked to deliver new recycling cans to residents, lead a team of employees and volunteers on trips to earn All-America City status in 2006 and 2019, set up and run a flood recovery center in 2013, and manage many city response programs during a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. Sandi Seader, ladies and gentlemen. Sandi will be moderating as well as serving as a panelist, so she'll be asking herself some questions this evening, too. And we'll all look forward to that. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go.
It's on. There we go. Thank you. Thank you, Magic Woman in the window in the back. Thank you so much, Justin. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Sandi Seader, Assistant City Manager, and I'm going to need to make sure I get that biography back from him. That sounded pretty good. I appreciate it. And for many of you who know me, you know that me talking to myself is not a rarity, so it should go great today. First of all, welcome and thank you so much for being here today. I think democracy is one of my favorite subjects. It's not necessarily everyone's, but it's critical. It's so important to what we're doing here. There's lots of levels of government that we're going to talk about today. So first off, we had invited Congressman Neguse. He was unable to join us, but he did provide a video for you all. So we're going to actually start off with Congressman Neguse's video. So. I think. There we go. That guy looks familiar.
Everybody, Joe Neguse here. I am so proud to be your congressman and to join you virtually tonight for this incredibly important program. I first want to start by thanking the Longmont Museum for hosting this incredible Thursday Nights at the Museum series, and of course the Longmont Multicultural Action Committee as well for all of their hard work and their leadership, in particular on the Voices of Change initiative. I wish that I could be with all of you in person. Unfortunately, duty calls in Washington, but nonetheless, I am so grateful to be able to spend some time this evening talking to you about the work that we must do as a community in the days, weeks, and months ahead. And of course, did not want to miss the chance to weigh in on a theme as important as this one. Now, of course, as you all are undoubtedly aware, you've opted tonight for a civics lesson. Usually, when people hear the word civics lesson, they start looking for the nearest exit, right? Or perhaps bracing themselves for a 400-page textbook or an incredibly long and dense lecture. This will not be that. Honestly, choosing to spend your Thursday night talking about democracy, talking about civics, talking about the work that must be done together in society, instead of scrolling through social media, just by way of example, is, in my view, true dedication to the cause, true dedication to our democratic republic, true dedication to reknitting the social fabric of our country, which is why I am so grateful to all of you for being a part of it. Now, often when people think of civics, they think of the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives, or perhaps the marble steps of the U.S. Capitol in Washington. But if my time in public service taught me anything, it's that democracy doesn't actually start in Washington, D.C. Democracy starts in rooms just like the one that you are sitting in right now. It starts in the homes of constituents, hardworking citizens, Americans of good faith, the people who you are sitting right next to, your neighbors, all from different backgrounds, different walks of life, finding a way to come together, discuss the future of your city, your county, your state, and our country. It looks like the organizers of this event tonight, individuals who refuse to stay on the sidelines and instead choose to find a way to engage our community, to listen, to truly listen, and to advocate, to try to be a voice for the voiceless in Longmont and beyond. Now, of course, we're very lucky because in Longmont, we have a proud tradition of civic participation, whether we're discussing climate action, affordable housing, so many important integral issues and challenges facing the community. The heart of our democracy depends on the active involvement of the community. Your presence here tonight is more important than you might think. It's incredibly meaningful. Walking in those doors, walking through those doors, and using your voice are two of the most powerful tools, really, we have in civic society. And I'm so grateful that you've decided to use them. So with that, I thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be a very small part of this larger conversation. It's certainly a privilege to represent all of you in the United States Congress, and I look forward to hearing about the ideas that are sparked tonight, and I'll certainly look forward to seeing you all back home in Colorado sometime soon. Thanks so much. Stay safe, stay healthy, and perhaps above all else, stay hopeful.
Wonderful. So as Congressman Neguse talked about, there's lots of levels of government. There's not just the federal government. There's all kinds of arenas in which people are here to serve our community. He obviously works in the federal level. Does anyone know, we're going to do a little audience participation, what types of services the federal government provides? Just shout them out. Just yell them loud for me. None right now. I guess that was a setup, wasn't it? Yeah. Well, let me tell you what the federal government should be providing. The federal government, you have Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court. They handle national issues like defense, immigration, interstate commerce, constitutional rights, and they set the framework for the country. After the federal government is state government. Any ideas on what the state government provides for you as residents? Voting. It's actually a county role, but we're going to get into that a little bit more. What else? There is certainly state ballot issues also. Say that again? National Guard. I think that's still federal. Infrastructure, some infrastructure, yeah. Here in Colorado, we're talking about the governor, the state legislature, and the state courts, and the states are pretty powerful. They write criminal law, oversee education policy, regulate health systems, and define how elections operate. So there's the elections tie. Yeah, many policies that shape your daily life are decided at the state level. Yeah, very good. All right, let's talk about what's next after a state. Counties, that's right. What do counties provide? Yeah, I see there's like a county cheering section over here. I think that's awesome. You're like well represented. Yeah, very good. What do counties provide? Property tax. Yeah, to run the government, that's right. Yeah, that's right. The public health, that's right. Counties often administer the state responsibilities locally. Counties actually serve at the pleasure of the state. And so they do things like, run the actual election. So the state sets the election law, but the county actually runs the election. Actually, this lady to my left runs the election along with her staff. Boulder County runs the election. Counties also handle public health, public records, human services, and the sheriff's office. So those are some of the responsibilities of the county. Yeah, there we go. There's some org charts going up. And then there's the city. That's what I get to represent today. The cities are where kind of the rubber meets the road when it comes to different services. I'm going to flip this question. Rather than asking you what services do city provide, I would just like to ask you, what's the first thing you did this morning when you woke up? You drank coffee. Made with water provided by the city of Longmont. And did you plug that coffee pot into the electrical outlet provided by Longmont Power and Communications? Yeah? No? It was a pour over? Yeah. That's good. That's good. I like that too. That works. Yeah, that works. What else? I heard somebody say check email on your broadband provided by Nextlight. Very good. What else? Zoning. That's right. We provide the zoning. You took trash to the curb. Yeah, we're responsible for your trash recycling and composting. And the curb. We're also responsible for the curb. Yeah, and the concrete and the street and the signs. Anybody get pulled over this morning? Oh, no, okay. We also provide public safety. Those are the kinds of things that happen on the local level. So you tried to get pulled over? What? Oh, fire. Yeah. Yes, fire is extremely important. And we're going to go over all the things that the city does, but the cities are where the rubber meets the road, where we provide the infrastructure, the utilities, the quality of life services like the Longmont Museum, and as well as the public safety side of it, police, fire, emergency management. So, yeah. Hey, that's pretty good. See, they don't need a lesson. They got this. Okay, well, I do want to show a little video about city government that will help just kind of define what a council manager form of government is. There's lots of different city governments, and so sometimes you'll see something happen in Denver that doesn't look like something that might happen in Longmont. Let's explore some of the different types of local government there is.
The city of Longmont was founded in 1871 and operates using a council-manager style of municipal government. To better understand that, let's discuss the three most common forms of local government in America. First, there's the strong mayor, weak city council form of municipal government. This is where the city's elected mayor oversees the city budget and leads the city policy. They oversee appointing or removing departmental heads, as well as representing the city on the state, national, and international levels. Examples are the city of Denver or New York City. Next, there's the weak mayor, strong council form of municipal government. The council oversees appointing departmental heads and, in consultation with the mayor, drafts the city's budget. The mayor may have veto power, but is still limited compared to the strong mayor variant. The city of Chicago uses a weak mayor form of government. Finally, there's the council-manager style of municipal government that Longmont operates under. The council-manager form of municipal government emerged after waves of corruption in the 1920s, when city employees were often replaced whenever a new mayor was elected into office. This, as well as protections granted to public employees by the federal government, stifled widespread corruption amongst municipal governments. The mayor and council are responsible for appointing a city manager as well as for drafting and passing city ordinances. They also approve the city's budget proposals. The mayor is the city representative but has no veto or additional powers compared to the other elected council members. The city manager oversees the day-to-day operations of the city. They're responsible for drafting the city budget, appointing departmental heads, and implementing policies that the mayor and council approve. Policy direction stems from the city charter, then the city council, who then directs the city manager for implementation. Let's look at how the city is structured using our handy city organizational chart. At the top are Longmont residents who vote the city council into place. The council employs three roles. First, the city attorney's role is to represent the municipality. They advise the city on legal matters and represent the city in court. The municipal judge, courts, and probation's role is to handle violations of Longmont's municipal code and charter. The judge is appointed by the council, but is retained by the voters every 2 years after their appointment. And we've already discussed the city manager's role in hiring heads of staff. These are the assistant city managers. Longmont's city manager also acts as the executive director of the Longmont Housing Authority, which provides affordable, city-owned housing to approved residents. The city manager also hires the executive director of Nextlight, the city's own fiber gigabit internet provider.
When you want your voice to count in what happens within your community, you look first to the local level. That's because municipal government is where citizens are most involved in taking control of their own destinies. Local control might sound like a simple concept, but it requires complicated services provided by thousands of municipal officials and employees. Municipal government succeeds when elected and appointed citizens listen to make sure that each voice is heard, carefully planning to meet responsibilities and capitalize on opportunities. The plans inspire performance, projects take shape, and citizens reap the benefits.
That footage aired on Longmont televisions in the mid-1990s. Since then, Longmont's population has increased by over 50%. With this increase comes new challenges that requires the city manager and all city departments to work together to provide excellent customer services for those who live in, work in, and visit Longmont. Here's a look at the many departments that provide those services. External services includes Parks and Natural Resources, Transportation, Planning and Airport, Facilities Maintenance, Recreation, Golf, Library and Culture, Housing and Community Investment, Planning Development Services, and Human Services. Utilities and Public Works includes Public Works and Engineering, Water and Waste Services, Electric Services, and any other division that falls under the Public Works umbrella. Shared services includes the Department of Strategic Integration, the Finance Department, and other divisions including City Clerk, Communications, ETS, Community and Neighborhood Resources, Fleet Services, HR, and Purchasing and Contracts.
That's my
Finally,
group. Sorry,
the
continue.
Assistant City Manager / Public Safety Chief oversees the Fire Chief, the Police Chief, the Collaborative Services Chief, along with the additional positions seen here.
Justin, did you get pulled over this morning? Public safety.
Our mission is to enhance the quality of life for those who live in, work in, or visit our community. When every employee lives by and is accountable for the values listed below, Longmont will be the best municipal organization in the world.
Let's go ahead and
city
stop it there.
attributes, shared, individual, and organizational. Individual employees and the
So the video goes on to share with employees the 13 city attributes that we expect from our employees around things like good communication and positivity and, a service ethic and making sure that you're being fiscally transparent, all those kinds of things. So we don't need to go necessarily into all those, but I want you to be assured that your employees that you are paying for through your taxes see this video. We talk about the attributes pretty constantly because it's really important for how we deliver service to the community. So thanks for watching that. I appreciate that. The important thing to know about this is that the three levels of government work together. They're not silos. They have to be able to have handoffs and cooperation and collaboration. Federal programs are offered nationally, shaped by the state, and delivered locally. And that's called federalism. That's where the federalism piece comes in. Shared governance designed to prevent too much power from sitting in one place. Representative democracy works because each level has different defined powers and limits. And so understanding these limits and where the lines are is an important part of the system. So one of my favorite trivia questions for folks as we get started is there's lots of people who represent you, from the president all the way to your local council member. Anybody have an idea of the number of people who represent you if you live in Longmont? Any idea the number of people that represent you? And are you counting on your fingers and toes? Yeah. 15? I hear 15. 20. 24. They're getting there. 35 is a bit much, yeah. But you guys are right in the right. You're right in the right area. If you live in Longmont, there are 29 people who represent you. And this includes anything from I'm going to go ahead and read the list of all the people who represent you as an individual resident. So there are 4 council people, 3 at large, and 1 that's in your geographic ward, plus the mayor, so that's 5. 3 county commissioners, 1 St. Vrain Valley School Board member, 1 RTD board member, 1 state house representative, 1 state senator, 1 federal house of representatives, 2 federal senators, and 1 president and vice president as a team. There you go, thanks. But in addition, there's also a county clerk, county coroner, county treasurer, county assessor, county sheriff, district attorney, governor and lieutenant governor, secretary of state, state treasurer, attorney general, and 3 CU Board of Regents. Whew, that's a lot. Yeah. Thanks, Justin, for putting up all the people. There's a lot of work that goes into serving the communities, and so I appreciate you being here today because what individuals do matter in this democracy. So we're going to talk a little bit about what does that mean and how does that work. I lost my place there. Okay. So we don't have representation without elections. So I would really like to introduce Molly Fitzpatrick, who is your Boulder County Clerk and Recorder, to talk a little bit about how ballots are designed, distributed, verified, certified. What are some of the safeguards around how she and her team protects your vote? And then at the end of this whole session, we'll have some Q&A. So if you have some questions for Molly, just make sure to hang on to them. So, Molly Fitzpatrick.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who showed up tonight. It's really cool to be here on a Thursday morning with so many people who care about this topic. And thank you to the Longmont Museum for hosting. So, to give an overview of what we do, basically we do everything when it comes to elections. We're overseeing the nuts and bolts of election administration, but our team, our full-time staff, is only about 13-ish people. We have hundreds of election judges who help oversee these elections, and I see some of our election judges up here, but if you're an election judge, can you please raise your hand? And we can give a worker or a poll watcher any involvement. Yes, thank you. There's a difference between workers and judges. But, we are so grateful to the hundreds of people, the Democrats and the Republicans, who show up election after election to actually implement these elections for our voters. It's a lot of work. Like I said, we do end-to-end election administration. So we design the ballots, we mail the ballots, we set up in-person voting, we actually process all those ballots, we verify identity, we sort the ballots, and then we tabulate the ballots and load them to our election night results reporting website. So there are so many steps involved in each part of the process, and one of the myths is, oh, it's just, Molly, it's you and your, 13, 14, member staff overseeing the elections, and there's no transparency. How do I get involved? And that could not be farther from the truth. Like I mentioned, we have these hundreds of judges every single election who show up and actually perform these duties. Election judges are the people who are actually verifying the signatures on those ballots to ensure that the person who signed that ballot actually was that person. They're the people who are actually tabulating those ballots. They're verifying those ballots. They're checking in voters. They're collecting ballots from our secure 24-hour ballot drop boxes. So that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is that it's just myself and a few people running this election. It couldn't be farther from the truth. Our operation is extremely transparent. We are so proud of the transparency that we have in Boulder County. We have really robust tour schedules, and in 2024, we brought over 600 individuals from our community through our ballot processing tours. And so the public is actually able to see what happens when we take control of your ballot, when we take receipt of your ballot, all the way through tabulation. Nothing is a secret. And we've seen a high turnout for these tours, and that's one of the things that gives me hope, is that people just keep showing up. And one of the things that I always say in those tours, because I give them myself, is no matter what brought you here, know that you're really welcome. If you're someone that has doubts, we're super glad you're here. Ask your questions. Let's, have a dialogue. Let's have a relationship. Let's make sure that you know that we're open to receiving whatever doubts or questions that you have. Most of the time, though, the people that show up are people who are wanting to be helpful in this moment. So when Congressman Magoo said, be helpful, this is something that everyone in this room can be helpful around. Being able to see the process for yourself and attest. I actually saw those ballots being processed. Here's why I trust it and why I think you should too. And by the way, if you don't, just call them or go there. They'll show you the process. So that's one thing that I think is really important, is being very accessible, very transparent, and be welcoming. We're really careful in our language to make sure that no one feels like they're not welcome in our space. We really want everyone to feel included and welcome, regardless of party affiliation, regardless of what concerns people have about the election. So that's kind of at a high level how we run the election end to end. It's a transparent process, and it's a very secure, accessible process. And one of the things that I would offer is that sometimes it's hard to counter what's happening in these other states. What I hear a lot is I trust what's happening in Colorado, but what do I tell my friends who meet people in Georgia or Arizona and their friends or family are concerned? There's a couple of things that they can do. One, encourage your friends and family to reach out to their local elections office and ask for a tour. That's one of the biggest things that I would advocate for. But there are some universal truths about how elections are conducted across the country, regardless of what state you're in. And by the way, the way in which elections are run are up to the states. It is a state's choice. Nothing can change that. But there are some universal truths that kind of cut across all of us. The first is that there is bipartisan oversight in every single state. Republicans and Democrats are overseeing these elections together. They're making these choices together and determining how ballots are counted and processed. Bipartisan oversight is occurring in every single state. The second thing is that there are transparency requirements in every single state. There are reports, there are things like watcher programs that are required to be publicly accessible. No matter what your state you're in, there's some sort of transparency laws baked into that state's election laws. The third is that every single year, election officials, whether it's judges or full-time staff or county clerks, have to go through some sort of continual education to make sure that we are all maintaining best practices. So those are some things, and those are that can resonate with people no matter what state you're in, and those things have been tested to land with voters, and they're accurate too. So that's something that could be really helpful from a more national perspective when it comes to instilling trust in our elections.
Thank you so much, Molly. I appreciate that. I know as a voter in Boulder County, I certainly appreciate all the work that you do, as does our clerk's office, because I know that we help to participate, but every time there's a question, we're like, well, thank goodness the county runs the election. So we appreciate your support and service. Yeah, thank you. So obviously, elections are a hot topic, and people certainly do get to have their say. Not everyone agrees or supports the outcome of our elections, as we have seen recently. This sort of disagreement can lead to incredible polarization. And so to talk a little bit about that, I'd like to introduce I'm going to make sure I say it right, Tom Cosgrove, who is from the New Voice Strategies, and who did not tell me he was a Nobel Prize winner. I mean, I don't know how we could have come up in conversation.
I'm not a Nobel Prize winner.
Okay.
I worked for one.
Okay, fair enough. Well,
Big difference.
Still, I'm just saying. I'm impressed nonetheless. So Tom, why don't you talk a little bit about your experiment that kind of turned into a that did turn into a documentary for PBS on this topic?
Well, first I want to say thank you all for coming out tonight, and thank you, Justin, and the folks here at the museum for inviting me to be a part of this, and my friends Carmen and Ray Ramirez, who set me up to do this. Anyway, I've been involved in electoral politics and social movements since 1980. I've worked in campaigns from state rep to president. I've had some big successes in my life and lots of defeats, because that's part of how elections work. I've been a lobbyist. I've worked for the Sierra Club as a Northeast representative. I started a Democratic ad firm. So I've had a lot of experiences, and I like to put them all in the basket of doing my part to perfect the Union. And as many of you may know, in the preamble to the Constitution, the United States Constitution, it sets out that our purpose as a people is to perfect our Union. It's not a perfect thing. It's never going to be a perfect thing. It only improves when we get involved in the process. And so, as several people have said tonight, you just showing up and being in this room is part of that process, and I want to thank you for that. The story of this film that you're going to see a little clip up here in a minute dates back to 10 years ago. I was working with a videographer in Boston and the communications school at Boston University, and we'd built a smartphone app that we thought was going to be a game-like feature to get more young people into the election process in 2016. And the name of the app was called Involved. It was spelled without an E, and the tagline was, "Democracy is a spectator sport, get involved." And you went on the app and you picked an issue that mattered to you: climate change, immigration, gun violence. And once you clicked on that, you saw a series of quotes from candidates on how to solve that problem, but you didn't know who said it. So you picked on the quote that you found interesting, and it took you to 3 levels of news coverage: an old-style anchor desk story with retired news anchors in Boston, a YouTube-style story done by a BU journalism grad student, and a deep dive written by an online commentary section called The Conversation. At the end of that, you had more knowledge around whether it was Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton or Marco Rubio, who were the candidates we tested in the pilot in the primaries in early 2016. And we rebuilt it. We were ready to roll it out for the general election. We had a lovely National Public Radio story, and then it stalled, because the elite in America, and particularly those that I knew that funded projects like this, all assumed Hillary Clinton was going to win. And so they didn't want to invest the money in it. And so this really great idea that tested so well was just going to end up in the bin. And Larry Anderson, who was the videographer who had worked with me on this and with the students at BU, and I happened to get into a bitch session on the telephone. And Larry, you should know, lives and edits on a sailboat in Boston Harbor. And so when he's animated, it echoes on the phone. And I had walked out from my cabin in Pennsylvania out to the bridge where I got cell phone service. And so as we were in this kind of complaint session about how this great idea that tested well, we had such high hopes in, was over, we decided to blame it on the changes in the culture, and we blamed those changes on reality television. And so, as Larry and I ought to do, the more we argued with each other and debated and complained, we decided we had to do something about it. And so we ended that call, and we decided we were going to create our own reality show that was around bridging the divides in the country. And a few days later, we had a name for it. We called it Divided We Fall. And we had a concept for it. And I started recruiting people to be a part of it. And then the 2016 election happened. And whichever side of the aisle you were on for that election, it was earth-shaking, unexpected and earth-shaking. So we thought, oh, we got to do this right away. And in the course of the work that I had done over my career, I knew a woman named Jerry Laybourne, and Jerry had created Nickelodeon News, and she created the O Network with Oprah, and it was the first woman president of ABC News, and I had set up a meeting with her to discuss this idea in her apartment in New York City. And I arrived, and no sooner than I was in the door, she said to me, "Don't take your coat off, Tom." I thought, oh, this is really bad. And I said, why? And she said, well, it's really simple. You have a brilliant idea. Slow the F down before you ruin it. And when you've slowed down and you've thought about how to bring more people to the table to think what it needs to be, and you're ready to build it, come back to me, and I will set you up with Jonathan Barzilay, the COO of PBS. So long story short, that's kind of what we did. It took 2 years. And in the September of 2018, Larry and I filmed 12 strangers over a weekend who were invited to participate in a process on what it means to be an American today, the divides in the country, and how they might help us bridge them. They were equally divided over Donald Trump. They arrived Friday at 3 o'clock, they left Sunday at 3 o'clock, and 3 weeks later, 8 of them were at a barbecue together on Cape Cod. Strangers on that first Friday. And we were like, wow, this is really gonna work. And so I had a favor that I called in with a friend, and 2 weeks later, we had a trailer that was narrated by Dan Rather. And we put it out, and it wasn't gonna go anywhere because I had purposely filmed a group of 12 Gen Xers in Massachusetts, all of whom were white. And so that was a challenge, right? And I did that purposely because I really didn't know how to have this experiment. This is really what we had designed. We built an experiment. We created what we called a conversation choreography to film people, a process to take them through over the weekend and see what happened. But I didn't know how to put a person of color in that space and make it safe. So we realized part of that was the location, the geography. So 3 months later, we went to Chicago, and we did it again. This time, we had people of color on both sides, red and blue, and it worked again. So what I'm going to show you right now is that 3-minute trailer that Dan Rather remade with both groups. And then just so you know the arc of this story, this film was broadcast on PBS in April of 2020. In the spring of 22, we brought 8 of the original participants here to Colorado. They watched it live with an audience at the Dairy Arts Center. And so the other little clip you're going to see is the promo for that piece. So if you want to go ahead and play that, please. Thank you.
Take away the politicians, the parties, the pundits, the social media buzz, the preconceptions, the fear. What if real people from opposite sides of the political divide came together to have the hard conversations with curiosity and open minds?
If you're in Camp A, B is the enemy, and if you're in B, A is the enemy, regardless of what you say.
That's the reason why things are so bad, and that's the reason why things aren't changing, because we're not talking about it.
You know, nobody's doing anything out of, malicious intent.
99% of the stuff out there is propaganda anyway to make us hate each other.
I want data on what do all Americans, if you poll Americans, what do we truly agree and disagree on, and I think we'd be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. Join our participants as they come to understand each other and work to bridge our divides.
A lot of men, they're not privy to what women have to deal with from other men.
Today, if you voted for Trump, by default, you're an idiot, you're a racist.
Well, I don't like to be called racist because I am not. And that's why I said I am not right away.
Well, don't say that. I'm telling you, stop saying that.
That's like the worst thing you can say.
You have to detain them, whether it's in a Walmart somewhere, and people are just gonna call them cages.
They're dog kennels that they're being kept in.
They're big dog kennels.
It seems as if we're caught in between this conundrum of like capitalism, which is just greed, and then trying to do what's best.
Capitalism is greed, and we don't need to go down that rabbit hole right now.
We already live in a mostly socialized society, so why wouldn't I want my tax dollars to pay for my kids to be healthy and well educated?
So many internet tough guys, people that couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag, they're the most disrespectful, they think they're the toughest in the world.
If I have to go through some additional, background checks or clearances in order for other people's lives to be saved in the future, I'm all for it.
If a school shooting happens, that's polar. We need to take away people's guns. Like 100 people get shot the next day in Chicago. Nobody's fighting to take away guns.
The temperatures change just a little bit. As a whole region, we're not going to be able to produce the food.
With the climate and global warming, you have to start training people to live
inconvenient lives.
Progress was made. Lives were transformed.
It was awkward for me because I was coming in here as a Trump supporter, right? And I actually found out a lot about myself.
I can talk till I'm blue in the face with my friends about the same things, but you gave me something new to go on, so you shifted my perspective.
It's not about convincing someone that I'm right and they're wrong or vice versa. It's about finding the common ground and realizing that there is common ground.
Any political difference that might exist is really just one small piece of who we are as people.
What can we do, personally to change the conversation or make the conversation more civil? We just did it.
Coming soon. Divided we fall. Democracy is a journey. Join the journey.
Thank you. Go ahead and play the other one too, please. This one's just 30 seconds.
For the weekend.
I have this wonderful ability where I can appall myself at times.
It was one weekend that altered my perception and my method of communication that's lasted me throughout all my verticals and relationships.
We all came out of this saying, I wish everyone in this country could do this. Yeah.
So I look forward to talking to you and answering your questions about it. What Amanda said there at the end was sort of the universal sentiment of all 24 people. They just wished everybody else could have that same opportunity. And within that is both hope and also a reminder that we're in this together. So, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to ask you all a couple questions, and if you all would like to think about your questions, we'll be moving to you shortly. But I'll get us kicked off with a few questions. So, first of all, how did you get started in your work? And I'll start with Molly. How did you get started in this work?
Sometimes I say when I was like 6 years old and like staying with my grandmother a lot growing up, she was like highly political. And we always, like one of my core memories growing up is watching election results with her come in. And I was always fascinated by that. And so I always just like was fascinated by elections at like a very, very young age. But I came to CU Boulder when I was 18 years old, and I started registering voters when I was 19 years old. And then I eventually, I continued to stay with a nonprofit organization, New Era Colorado, whose mission is to engage young people in the political process. And so I registered voters, worked on ensuring that those young voters knew the mechanics of how to actually participate in elections, how to cast their ballot, find their polling place. And I remember feeling like it was incredibly complicated back in 2008, 9, 10, before we modernized our elections in 2013. And, I decided when I was 28 years old to run for office. And I was telling Tom earlier, I was at that time, Hillary Hall was term limited, and I was trying to find somebody to run for the position that I thought would be really great. And no, everyone was like, nope, nope, nope. Maybe they had some foresight of like what was to come for these positions. I don't know. But I decided to run and have loved it ever since. It's definitely changed though. I got elected in 2018, so started in 2019. So what I thought the job was going to be in 2019 has been very different than what it's actually turned out to be. But I love every minute of it, love the people that we work with and the actual work that we do.
That's amazing. Yeah. I can picture you as a 6-year-old with the election. Can you all picture that? Yeah, I can too.
I love that.
Yeah.
My grandmother was a big influence on me too. I tell people all the time that I was in my 20s and the county attorney was going to cross-file he was a Republican, he was going to run as a Democrat too, and he asked her, he said, Mrs. Moran, what difference will it make if I'm a Democrat? And she said, well, your food will taste better. So, so family that was involved, cared, that was kind of the start of it. And then I had a history teacher in college that gave me some extra credit, so I qualified for an internship in Washington and went there in 1980 after I graduated, and I've been involved ever since.
Yeah, very cool. I know, speaking of grandparents, my grandfather, very conservative Republican in Indiana, and when he asked me what I was going to go to college for, and I said, I'm going to work in the government, it was the most disappointing look I'd ever seen in my life from my grandparents. Okay, so, I'm curious. You ran for office when you were 28 years old. Like, I can't even imagine that. I was working for government when I was 28, but certainly wasn't running for office. What was that like?
Well, I didn't really have time to understand what it was like because it happened so quickly. I was saying earlier that I think I declared like literally the day that you had to in order to qualify. So it was a very quick experience, but in my experience, I got a lot of support really quickly and early. I think because I had been so focused on elections for my career leading up to running for office and working to make sure that voters knew how to participate in our democracy. And I, had done all sorts of things like registering voters to working on the elections modernization bill in 2013 to move towards all mail-in ballots and vote centers instead of, polling places. I had just known so many people in the community through that work that I think for a lot of people, it's like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense as a natural next step. But it was a hard decision to come to because it was never in my plan to run for public office, which is why it took me like until the day you had to declare to get there. But for me, I just got a lot of support. And what I say to people that have asked me is, just keep focusing on like what you like to do and where you think your skills match up, and like something naturally will evolve for that, because it did for me. And it's been a great experience.
Yeah, very good, thanks. Tom, I have a question for you. So, I've gotten to know you just a little bit over this week, but I've really appreciated your perspective. When people ask you, well, what can I do? How can I participate in this? What do you tell them?
As I said before, showing up at events, reading, paying attention, all of that matters, but you do all that or you wouldn't be here. There's an immediate thing that you can do in this week coming up is the party caucuses are coming up. Next Saturday is the Democratic caucus, and Tuesday, just in the middle of the week. Go if you've never been. It's an experience, and you can participate in choosing who wins enough delegates to go along. This will be the onto the county level and on and on and on, and basically it's going to help determine who's on the ballot in the primaries in June. So there's that process you can do, right? Having conversations with people. Some are really easy. Like, when was the last time you recall speaking to the clerk in the grocery store, right? Just people you encounter in life. We're in a point in America right now where everyone's getting to be afraid of everybody else. And so just little simple politeness goes a long way.
Very good. Molly, what do you tell people? I know you kind of shared a little bit about volunteering for an election judge or coming for a tour, but what are ways that you encourage people to participate?
From our office's perspective, absolutely participate in a tour, be an election judge, be an election watcher. That's a really important activity, and it's a very flexible activity, so you can observe any part of the elections process on a schedule that works for you. And another thing you can do, we have tons of resources on our website. Get educated so you can share with other people about our system. But, similar to what Tom said, I always say that, voting is an extremely efficient way to make a difference and make a change. But it's certainly not the only way. There's a lot of people that don't, have the ability to vote. Maybe they're too young or not citizens or one reason or another. And, there's so many other ways you can make a difference. Protesting, talking to your neighbors, doing any type of public service. There's so many other ways outside of voting, but voting is an extremely easy way, especially here in Colorado, to make an impact very quickly.
So since we have you here, let me ask you, I think the question that is on a lot of people's minds, is voting safe?
Yes, voting is safe. Colorado is a great place to be a voter, and that continues to be true in 2026. There are some things happening nationally around elections. There's definitely an attack on elections. We've seen that with some big federal legislation, the SAVE Act, Save America Act, MEGA Act, executive orders. There's a lot there, all encompassing around providing documentary proof of citizenship, or banning mail-in ballots, or adding photo ID requirements, penalizing election workers who fail to do things properly. So there's a lot of bad things out there, but we are fortunate in this country because the Elections Clause of the U.S. Constitution says that states are responsible for running their elections. And so I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, is that we get to choose how we run elections. Arizona gets to choose how they run elections. There is no federal directive in there. We can acknowledge that the federal climate and rhetoric can influence everything that we do. It can influence state law for sure. But here in Colorado, we are continuing to shore up things that make our elections even more secure, make them even more accessible. And so I think it's really important that our office continues to monitor things that are said nationally. But right now, there's not a lot that the federal government can do without congressional support and approval, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen with a lot of these federal bills and legislation that we're seeing. But we're going to continue to monitor it. I was the president of our Clerks Association in 2024, and so a lot of the work that we did then is still applicable now. How do we ensure that counties in Colorado are prepared to run the best elections possible in 2026? Because at the end of the day, we need to stay focused on the nuts and bolts of elections. We need to make sure we're doing the basic blocking and tackling, so there are no errors, because elections is zero tolerance for errors. And so it's a balance between not letting the federal or the rhetoric nationally, cause a distraction, not only for election officials, but also the public. Like, we want people to just remember, check in with your state's local election office. Has anything changed? Voter registration deadlines, that sort of thing. So there's a lot going on, but we are confident that this election is going to be good, and we've got a lot of people looking at it from different angles.
I just want to give you a round of applause for that.
I'd like to add to that if I can,
Yes, please.
Sandy. So how many people watched the State of the Union the other night? Right? Muted, okay. I don't know, the picture was a little worse. But so there was a point in the speech where President Trump talked about the SAVE Act, right? And what Washington in particular is always really good about is creating an acronym of something that sounds much better than it is, right? And the SAVE Act is this attempt to basically deny a whole lot of people the opportunity to vote, right? And in his remarks that night, he said his source for why we needed to do this was the Heritage Foundation, right? So how many of you remember during the election something called Project 2025, right? Which was a Heritage Foundation project, right? So here's this big impetus, this SAVE Act. It's so important, it's so important. So what's the data at the Heritage Foundation that shows this is a problem? They have 1,400 examples of voter fraud over the last 10 years. 1,400, right? So the Brookings Institute, anybody know what that is? It's just sort of a opposite side of the political spectrum. They went through that data and then matched it up by year and found that on average there's about 134 cases of voter fraud prosecuted in the United States every year, all right?
How much?
Meanwhile, in an average year now, over 1 million people are victims of voter identity. Or not voter, I mean identity fraud. Which do you think is a bigger problem the federal government should be solving?
No, you keep the microphone. I got another question for you. Yeah, you can't just drop the mic after that. So tell me this. I think this is interesting that this session was right after the State of the Union, for sure. Do you think that this experiment of democracy is going to continue in our country?
I'm always an optimist. I think we are more stressed now than in my lifetime and in the memories of most people who are alive. However, it's because we forget lots of the dark moments in our past. And if you're a person of color in America, you only have to go back to 1965 to realize how many rights you didn't have as a voter, right, when Johnson passed the Voting Rights Act. If you go back to the dark days of the 1950s and the McCarthy era, well, actually the McCarthy era began before McCarthy, right? It actually began in the late 1940s. It was the same House Un-American committees, but it was focused on Hollywood. It was mostly focused on Jewish actors, and they were communist. So there have been those dark moments in our past, and we managed to get our way out of it. And I think we will get our way out of this too. What's different this time that we didn't have in the past is we don't have a common platform of information. And so in all those other eras, whether it was FDR on the radio in the 1930s and 40s, or it was the beginning of television in the 50s and 60s, there was something in common that everybody kind of got the same information, and we could have the same conversation. We could disagree, but we would be disagreeing around the same substance, facts, story. As we all know, that doesn't exist anymore. And we've been on that downward path since the late 1980s and the arrival of cable television. Thank you, Ted Turner. And then Rupert Murdoch decided he wanted to move to America. I always say, the most dangerous immigrant that ever came to these shores was Rupert Murdoch, right? And he only became a citizen of the United States because one law we did have is you couldn't own a television station if you weren't an American citizen. So that's kind of our challenge, which again, it requires us to engage with each other, but I see that we're doing it. And so back to the film. When we brought people together, they only knew they were coming to participate in this experiment. They had assumptions about what was going to happen, but they didn't know who anybody else was. And so by the beginning of Friday evening, we had an exercise where I had two prompts put in the room that I knew was going to show the divide. And the first was, what was the proudest moment in your own lifetime as an American? And then after we discussed that, we flipped it. What is your least proud? Because I knew there would be a certain number of Trump and Obama that would come after that. What surprised me in Massachusetts was 7 out of the 12 people put the weeks after 9/11 as their proudest moment, coming together for each other. And I think now, looking to Minneapolis, it's like that moment that 9/11 was for those folks in Massachusetts back in 2018, as we look to the courage of people to show up for each other. Adam Sewer is a reporter for The Atlantic, and he wrote a piece a few weeks ago, and he coined a new term called neighborism, showing up. And that showing up is not just being in the streets. It was, checking in, getting your groceries, all the things that people couldn't do because there was really an occupying force in that city.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know that certainly, I've done a lot of work in the disaster world after our flood, and one of the biggest reasons people thrived well through a disaster is if they knew their neighbors well and could help each other out. Yeah. All right, well, it's just about time for you to answer some questions, but let me ask Molly one more question. So what keeps you going in this era of all things pointing to, the election, conversation that's happening today? What keeps you going?
A lot of deep breaths, honestly, as crazy as that sounds, deep breaths, staying hydrated, sleeping. But we have an incredible elections community in this state, and I don't know what I would do without the partnerships that I have with other county clerks or with other experts in this field to bounce ideas or questions off of. And the most important thing to the elections administrator and the administrators in this state is that we administer these elections well, and that is true no matter what political party affiliation you are. Some of my very closest friends in this world are Republicans, and we agree on 99.9% of elections, and they really deserve a lot of credit in this moment because they are standing up in rooms of people who despise them and despise the work that they do. And so, I think it's really important that we acknowledge those people and give them some love and appreciation for standing up so strong. But it's definitely the community of people that I am around and the people that are just working on this from every single level. David Becker is someone who runs a Center for Election Innovation and Research and was a former lawyer in multiple White Houses. And, I've asked him all the time these legal questions, and I ask our county attorneys these legal questions. I'm texting with the Secretary of State's office trying to figure things out, and everyone's so responsive no matter what time of night it is or what question it is, how basic it is. So it's the community. I mean, it's a very strong community of people who care about making sure that these elections are implemented well. And it's kind of cool just to be able to put political parties to the side and just focus on what's good for voters. So to me, that's why we're going to keep having a democracy, is because that's what we're doing now. We're going to keep moving forward. So it's an incredible community to be a part of, including our election judges and watchers and workers.
Great, thank you so much. I know that tomorrow I would be in big trouble with my own clerk's office if I didn't tell people that in local government for the city of Longmont, if you're interested in getting involved, we have dozens of boards and commissions that are advisory to the city council. We encourage people to run for city council, join those advisory boards when the city puts out calls for information or for feedback. We're getting ready to do our next customer satisfaction survey. If you receive one of those, please fill it out. That's one way to participate as well. So there's lots of ways that you can participate in city government as well. So if you're interested, come see me afterwards, because we have lots of boards. Anything you might be interested in, we probably have a board for it, would be my guess. The other thing I just want to point out, because we've been talking a lot about the partisan politics, is that municipal governments are nonpartisan by design. So you don't run, when you run as a council member for either political party, you run nonpartisan, because, as I like to say, there's no Republican or Democratic way to pick up the trash. You just got to pick it up. So, all right. So let's get to some of your questions. So Justin, I think you've got a microphone. If you are interested in asking one of our panelists a question, I see there's one over there.
So I'm really interested in the conversation of how we can get Democrats, Republicans discussing, and like your film showed, I am a Massachusetts person, and I grew up being able to talk to either Democrats or Republicans, and we could have a conversation. Now it seems like it's so loaded with so many other things. How did you get those people to be able to come together?
Tom?
So there are a lot of organizations in this bridging space. And so there are lots of opportunities for people to kind of come together and meet each other as opposites. What was different about our film and what we did, and I'm going to answer your question in a second, I'm backing up to it, is that we managed to accomplish something, at least with those 24 people, that stuck. So often when people come together on opposite sides, there's sort of a voyeur sense of it. I may be curious about you, or I may be showing up because I want to school you, on my point of view. But what we, half by design and half by accident, had created through the course of that weekend was, and it was Larry who observed this and coined it, was they learned to listen to each other with curiosity. And so we created the space for it. How we got them there was good old-fashioned vanity. They wanted to be on television. And so I used casting agencies. I did the work, but they had the databases. And so they were all just everyday people, hairdressers and cops and teachers and nurses and so on, but they were all people who were looking to be extras on a movie set. And so they were in a database, and it had the advantage to us, because when we watch television, mostly we see people who are attractive. It's part of what the medium is about, and so that worked for us. But the film still exists on PBS. It's called Divided We Fall, Listening with Curiosity. You can also stream it off my website, which is dividedwefalltv.org. On that website are discussion guides, one written by Jim Walker, sitting up here in the front of the room. And you could just put your own, you could have your own showing on it. Invite some people over, watch it, see what kind of conversation it sparks.
Thanks. Do you want to add anything to any conversations? Okay. Next question. Oh, we got a few.
Yeah, one of the things about this that does, I don't know how to say this, but it's not as nice, and the people you dealt with were pretty nice. I mean, I have family members on both sides, and one day a conversation got going, and it was about Trump. And the retort to that from one of the family members who is a Trump supporter said, well, you know, Joe Biden murdered his first wife. That was the answer. We can't even talk. I mean, I understand you got people together there. There are people you cannot talk to. And you can talk to them, but and some people are cruel. I mean, I don't know how to say that, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you about that. I always point out to people what we had advantaged was they were strangers. And as hard as it, you would think that would make it harder instead of easier. But they didn't know anything about each other, and that helped feed the curiosity. And I always like to say that the people who push your buttons are good at it because they know where they are. And when you're a stranger, they don't really know where your buttons are, right? So, so I hear that. One of the things I would say to you where you can go and learn more about this and kind of get some sense, there's an organization that's called More in Common. And it was created in London by a former London Times editor named Tim Dixon. And it did all this massive surveying in Europe, particularly in the UK. This is back before Brexit, trying to understand why all the immigration problems that were going on in Europe was driving all of this division. And they created an American chapter of it, and run by a guy named Stephen Hawkins. Stevens is actually in the film as one of the experts. And they did this massive survey back in 2018 where they sorted Americans into it was called the 7 Hidden Tribes of America. If you go on their website, there's a little quiz there you can take and you can see where you sort. But last year they did this massive amount of surveying on what's going on in America, 18,000 interviews, which is way beyond what mostly comes out. And those reports they started coming out with in January. And you can go there and you can see where people are on the Republican MAGA spectrum. And you may find some places in there that will identify people you'll want to talk to.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. The other thing that I would mention, and I think I'm also on this panel because of Carmen, I would say. But Carmen and I used to facilitate a lot of pretty tough conversations for the city together. And one of the things that is really critical is that most people, when they come angry to a meeting, to anything, to a family dinner, they're not feeling heard. And so the more questions that you can add, the more curiosity that you can have, oftentimes I find that brings people down because you're actually listening to the answers. Some of the answers are not going to make a lot of sense at first, but the more that you're able to probe and actually get curious about where people are standing and why, I find that it usually helps once they feel like they've been heard. Yeah. Okay, there were some questions down here. Oh, behind you, sir. I don't know if you can turn around and get the microphone right here. Yeah. There you go.
Thank you. If someone were to ask me,
what do you think that you could do to get Republicans and Democrats to work together? I think my answer would be, I'd start a centrist third party. That might cause them to work together to try to kill this party. It seems to me that what we need is more representation in government in the center. I'm not particularly in the center myself, but I think that's what we need. And I think we certainly need a third or fourth or fifth party. The two parties have gotten so far away from the center that they're not really being driven by normal people with normal needs.
Do you have a question you want to ask around that?
How might someone go about it, and is there any possibility? And if there were a possibility, would those two parties work together to kill it?
What do you think, Tom?
Not together.
Not together.
Among the participants in the film, that was a common theme. Some much more passionate about it than others. It's really hard. We have, historically, over 250 years, our political parties have shifted and changed, right? That's a more likely outcome than a new third party. And right now, I think that is, if that comes about, it's going to come from the center-right part of the country. Back to that More in Common survey, they've got like 9,000 interviews with Trump voters and have sorted them into 4 different categories. A quarter of those are people who are called recently right, and they were people who voted for him in 2024. In most of the public surveys out there, they are long gone. And so there's a reason when you see the public opinion polls on how poorly the president is doing, that coalition is falling apart. Somewhere on that center right may make a move to create something. You know, there are people who thought Liz Cheney might do that. But I think that's where it might come from. I don't see that on the center-left part of the country.
I'm going to add one other perspective also. About 10 years ago, there was a book that was written called The Metropolitan Revolution. And the concept was that eventually the federal government would implode on itself and that the cities would have to take over everything. Just saying. Just saying. Nonpartisan. Just saying.
Are you running?
Oh, no.
Yeah, Molly, help me out here. I read in the paper yesterday where this guy got mad at this person out in back of the bar and tried to run him over with the truck, and he got 180 days probation. Now this gal by the name of Tina Peters at Mesa County did something wrong, and she's in jail for 9 years. Is that right? What happened? Did she kill somebody?
Tina Peters did not kill anybody. She was convicted by a jury of her peers in Mesa County for breaking. One of the things that she did was forge identity to allow someone access into secure voting areas. And so that's why she's where she is. And all I can say is that she was convicted by a jury of her peers and convicted to 9 years in prison. And you know, I knew Tina Peters, and I'm very sad that that's what's happened, because she had multiple opportunities to do the right thing, and she didn't. And I think it sends a strong message that we need to take this responsibility of administering elections really seriously, and there is a punishment for that if you don't. So it's a very sad situation, and it's caused a lot of damage, and that's what I would have to say about it.
Thanks. Justin, what do you think? One more question, maybe, before we begin to wrap up? Maybe 2? Okay. He's getting his steps in today.
I'm just wondering what your opinion is of, and I'm not sure I'm the expert on the subject, but I've read that Australia, for example, has a penalty for not voting, whether it's through your income tax return or something like that, making voting mandatory I'd like to know what your opinion of something like that is. Both.
We'll have both, yeah.
I think that we should make voting as easy and secure as possible. I think we should make it a positive experience for people. I haven't thought a lot about like penalties for not voting, but I think that's someone's right to not vote if they don't want to. But I do think that we should make it a positive experience for people. We have automatic voter registration, which, by the way, is a great way to register to vote. You provide citizenship documents at the time when you're going to get your driver's license, and so it's a very secure way. But I sort of think that we should continue to make it as easy as possible, but I think penalties for it might be a step too far for me.
I think that'd be very anti-American. In a nation where I do this exercise in Jim's class every year, and I ask the students, imagine democracy as a three-legged stool of equality, justice, and freedom. Which one of those legs is most important to you? And when I did it with people in the cast, freedom is usually the one that comes up. That's kind of the value we identify the most with as an American. And so I think there's an anti-freedom part to that. However, I've always thought for a long time that we could easily organize that when a child is born in America and issued a social security number, they're entered into the voter registration system, and it's shared with the states, and it's out there. And the same with someone who becomes a naturalized citizen. We could make it that easy. All this effort that in the SAVE Act, et cetera, it's not to try to make everybody vote that registered. It's trying to keep people from being in the system.
All right, Justin, you thought maybe one more?
Thank you guys so much for being here and for everyone else who's here being involved. My question is kind of how to get the younger people to have less apathy. It's interesting that you ran when you were 28. I work with a lot of young people, and they look at me like I was like, do you guys want to go to the museum tonight and see the Civics? Like they just don't. I try and I talk and I try to do it in a fresh way, and I just don't see it. And I don't know how to get the young, because it's going to be, no offense to everyone in this room, but I don't know how. I don't see a lot of young faces, and I don't know how to get the young faces to be more engaged. No offense.
Just you, Justin, just you.
Yeah, I think young people are engaged. I think it's in a way that's not always as obvious to us, because I think the engagement is happening a lot online and on social media. So I think I've had the perspective that it's not necessarily apathy, but it is an access question. And I think you're doing all the right things by trying to prompt the conversation. And I think when I think about like access, I think about voter pre-registration. When those 15, 16-year-olds are going to get their permit or driver's license from the DMV, now they're automatically pre-registered to vote. So when they turn 18, they're going to automatically get that ballot for the first election that they're eligible for. We run robust high school programs, but I think that it's really important that while these high school students are within these circles of influence, like teachers and parents, that we continue to have those conversations even when it feels like it's not necessarily landing. I can appreciate that it might feel exhausting, but I think the message will go through, and I think saying it in an empowering way of like, I don't believe young people are apathetic, but I do think there's an access issue, and a lot of our systems have not been really designed to be inviting to young people. And so I think we need to rethink that, like what messages are we using? Like one of the things that I remember like jumping out at me when I was observing a vote center 10, 15 years ago was, are you a citizen of X county? And like, that's not how young people talk. It's like, do you live here? Have you lived here? Like even like like flipping the scripts like that, I think are really important. And I think making sure that when we're communicating with young people, it's as peer-to-peer as possible. So finding those leaders within high schools or middle schools, college, to go and organize their peers, because you're more likely to do something if someone proactively asks you to do something. So that was a lot of talking, some high-level thoughts.
One thing when we're in election season is use the ballot as a tool to educate. We end up with a lot of things on our ballots that the process is pretty easy in Colorado on getting things on the ballot as a constitutional question or referendum question instead of leaving it to a legislature to work it out. And for most people, those are really confusing. And so, Molly could tell you this with more expertise than me, but every time on a ballot, whoever the highest ranking official running, governor, senator, president, are always going to get the most votes. And as you go down through the ballot to each level of the 29 levels, there's going to be less votes. When we get to the referendum questions, there's even less. So organizing an event, even just in your family with a ballot, to have a conversation about what's on it, is one little way to start showing them that there's a process here that they need to pay attention to.
I think that's helpful. My youngest son turns 18 on Monday, and we talk about this kind of stuff all the time. And he goes through my ballot with me, and I try to kind of quiz him, like, you read that and you tell me what you read, and turn it into a game, keep talking about it, keep trying. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, kids, nieces, nephews, all of that. Yeah. Okay, I have one last question for you all, which is, what would you most want the public to understand tonight? Like, if they walk away with one thing, what is it?
Call your friends and family members in other states. In Colorado, we have continued to make sure that our elections are extremely accessible. Nothing has changed. We have same-day voter registration. Everyone automatically gets a mail-in ballot. All the good things that all of you already know about. Some things have changed in other states. Legislatures have passed different laws to change the governing of elections in their states, which they are authorized to do because the power to conduct elections and make laws about elections resides with the states. And some states have changed things over the years. So if you've got a family or friend in another state, call them and say, do a couple of things before your primaries start. Make sure that you're aware of any voter registration deadline changes, because some states do have voter registration deadlines. Make sure you know where to go vote, because your voting location may have changed. Just make sure they're prepared to exercise their right to vote this election.
That's a good question. That thing. I think the most exciting thing that I witnessed in the last bunch of years in politics was the election of Zohran Mamdani in New York. And here's why. It wasn't just who he was and that he got elected. He had 104,000 volunteers. I think there were 290,000 volunteers on the Harris campaign, as an example. And he made it joyful. He made it fun. And particularly back to the young people part, people want to be involved in something that's fun, right? Like if it's always, why do it, right? And so I was in New York last summer, and it happened to be the day that he was having a scavenger hunt around New York City. And he had all these clues, and you'd find a scavenger, you go to the next spot, and eventually you ended up at a place having chai with him, right? People loved it. So that's the message I take from you, is look for the ways to have joy and spread it.
Well, I want to thank our panelists tonight for this great conversation, and really thanks to you for coming out tonight. Because I would agree, when I told all of my friends I was going to help with a civics lesson, you'll notice none of them are here. So I appreciate you all being here and being interested and learning, and just keeping up the faith, keep working, keep voting, keep helping people to vote, participate in your government because it's yours. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.